once again, back once again, back once again, back once again, back once again with a beat. Let the bass kick.
Wisdom starts with a decision. We must first choose to receive it. And then it becomes our constant companion, guiding us on the journey God has called us to. I'm Scott, and this is the Wisdom in All Things podcast. This session, True Grit, Part 2, Being Wise is Tough Business. Here's a quote from Margaret Perlis. She says, "Grit, sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's weaker, but the constancy of our tenacity is based on the degree to which you can access, ignite, and control it." I'm going to say that one more time because that's just good stuff. Grit, sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's weaker, but the constancy of our tenacity is based on the degree to which we can access it, ignite it, and control it. This part 2 is going to focus on passionate perseverance. It really is grit distilled down to its simplest form. If you read part 1, this may feel like we're approaching the topic of grit backwards. Maybe. Part 1 was meant to be more of a drive-by on the idea of how grit can be seen as a disciplined behavior, which is an essential part of being wise. It provided a checklist of sorts to help us see where we're at on the grit meter. But most importantly, we tie those behaviors to the foundation of what I would call true grit. Basically, a life based on biblical principles and values that equals true character. Before we get to Margaret Perlis' summary of Angela Lee Duckworth's essence of grit, I wanted to highlight an excerpt from Melissa Dahl that helps us stay balanced in our view and pursuit of grit. This is from something that she had wrote called "Don't Believe the Hype About Grit," pleads the scientist behind the concept. Here's her quote. "Grit, as Duckworth has defined it in her research, is a combination of perseverance and passion. It's just that the former tends to get all the attention, while the latter is overlooked. I think the misunderstanding, or at least one of them, it's that it's only the perseverance part that matters," Duckworth told Science of Us. She goes on to say, "But I think the passion piece is at least as important. I mean, if you are really, really tenacious and dogged about a goal that's not meaningful to you and it's not interesting to you, then that's just drudgery. It's not just determination, it's having a direction that you care about," is what she says. In Margaret's quote in the beginning, she reveals that our constancy of tenacity is based on our ability to consistently stay connected to and in control of these characteristics. Here are the characteristics she highlights of grit. First, it's courage. Your ability to manage fear of failure is imperative, she says, and a predictor of success. Fear of failure is characterized by an unhealthy aversion to risk or a strong resistance to embracing vulnerability. So that's courage. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness in this context means careful and painstaking. Being careful and painstaking, it's meticulous. So courage, conscientiousness, and third, long-term goals and endurance is another characteristic. Long-term goals, she said, provide the context and framework in which to find the meaning and value of your long-term efforts, which helps cultivate drive, sustainability, passion, courage, stamina, grit. Next is resilience. Resilience is the powering mechanism that draws your head up, moves you forward, and helps you persevere despite whatever obstacles you face along the way. In other words, gritty people believe everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. And lastly, excellence versus perfection. Perfection is pedantic, binary, unforgiving, and inflexible, she says. Excellence is an attitude, not an endgame, bound with the notion of fulfillment of purpose, closely associated with virtue. It prioritizes progress over perfection. So those 5 characteristics: courage, conscientiousness, long-term goals and endurance, resilience, and then excellence versus perfection. Passionately persevere. You could read that as be strong and courageous from Joshua 1:9. In doing those things that truly matter. That's the combination. You want to be passionately persevering in those things that truly matter. The life of the wise is lived out this way. What defines us is not just what we do, but how we do it. If you go to my website, wisdominallthings.com, and then find True Grit Part 2, at the end of the post I have a link to a formal assessment of your level of grit that Professor Duckworth has created. It's a grit scale. You'll be able to find that as well. And that is how we quickly understand and apply wisdom in all things, mind, body, and soul. Thanks for listening to the Wisdom in All Things podcast. If you want to dig into wisdom a little bit more, stop by wisdominallthings.com.